The Mafia boss brought a stripper home, but absolutely not for his bed. When Roman Valenti led the terrified dancer into his massive, cold mansion, she was shaking with fear. She told him flat out that she wasn't going to sleep with him. His response: "Because if Victor's men knew where you danced, they know where you live." He didn't buy her body. He bought her survival. Roman was always 3 moves ahead, and he knew her apartment was already a deadly trap.
Let us open this dark chapter together, you and I. Picture the cheap neon bleeding through the heavy smog on the 91st block. The camera pushes into a filthy club running on raw impulse, the air thick with the sour stench of spilled liquor. Through the hazy lens, we find Roman sitting in the absolute shadows. He is motionless, radiating the terrifying stillness of a man who trades in violence. He ignores the writhing bodies around him. But then she steps into his line of sight. Beneath a tragic mask of makeup, her terror is a physical thing. You can almost see her heart battering against her ribs like a trapped bird. It is a harsh reminder that the most profound turning points in our lives often happen in the ugliest places, right when we finally stop looking for the light. Watch how the camera lingers on her trembling hands under the harsh amber spotlight. Every slow sway of her hips is a desperate survival tactic, a completely hollow pantomime of seduction. There is zero joy in her dark eyes, only the empty echo of deep psychological torment. She is dancing on the jagged edge of a cliff, performing just to delay the cruelty of the drunken men watching her. Roman sees right through the theatrical smoke. He easily recognizes the rigid dread of a bird with clipped wings, a captive holding her breath in a cage of strange faces. The harsh truth we must all eventually face is that survival often forces the most innocent souls to wear the darkest disguises just to see tomorrow. We all do what we must when the world leaves us no other options. The camera tightens on Roman's shadowed face. His dark eyes track her every move, entirely devoid of the dirty, drunken lust poisoning the room. He reads the tense lines of her body, watching how she subconsciously leans toward the distant exit. Then, the fragile tension snaps. A heavy patron lunges forward, his rough hand violently grabbing her delicate wrist. The physical shift in Roman is a microscopic earthquake. A single muscle in his jaw tightens. His relaxed posture evaporates into cold, lethal readiness. As the young woman tries to pull away, her pale face shatters with a silent, paralyzing horror. Roman clearly sees the invisible chains wrapping tight around her throat. It reminds us that the heaviest shackles in our human experience are never made of solid iron, but of pure, unadulterated fear. Roman rises slowly from the cracked velvet booth. There is no wild rage in his motion, only the chilling grace of a predator who knows he owns the dark. The stifling atmosphere in the club instantly suffocates further. The blaring bass fades as every lesser man in the room subconsciously shrinks away from his approaching shadow. He steps up to the stage with a devastating calm, a tragic stillness born from a lifetime of terrible violence. His voice is barely a whisper, yet it cuts clean through the noise. He simply tells the man to let go. The drunken fool, blinded by his own fragile ego, refuses to yield. Roman does not raise his voice. He just grips the man's arm, applying brutal, surgical pressure until the patron drops to his knees in agony. We learn here that true power never needs to scream to make the world listen. The girl stumbles backward into the harsh glare of the stage lights, her chest heaving with frantic, shallow breaths. She stares at Roman with wide, completely shattered eyes, caught in the terrifying realization that her sudden rescuer might just be a much deadlier wolf. Then Vincent, the club owner, slides into the frame like a slick disease. He paced on a greasy, desperate smile, offering free bottles to quickly smooth over the violent disruption. But Roman ignores him completely. His cold, unblinking gaze remains anchored to the trembling woman. Beneath her cheap glitter and terribly smeared mascara, he sees a tragic soul eroded by endless nights of cruelty. It is a heartbreaking truth of life that those who suffer the most often hide behind the brightest paint, praying the world will not hear their desperate cries. We are about to witness the absolute tragedy of human devaluation. Roman turns his glacial gaze to Vincent, his low voice dropping like heavy iron on the room. He calmly demands to know her price. You can see the greedy gears turning behind the manager's sweating forehead, caught violently between his love for dirty money and his profound terror of the quiet killer standing before him. But the sickness of greed usually wins. Vincent nervously names an astronomical sum. Without a flinch, Roman reaches into his coat and tosses down thick bundles of cash, paying double just to crush the air out of the room. Stick with me here, because this really matters. The darkest atrocities rarely occur in hidden cellars. They happen directly under bright lights, sustained by the silence of absolute cowards who gladly look away when the price is right. Vincent snaps his fingers, barking a harsh, degrading order for the girl to go with the man who just purchased her life. For a suffocating moment, we watch her paralyzed frame frozen in the neon glow. When she finally chokes out a desperate refusal, the greasy mask falls right off Vincent's face. Humiliated in front of a truly dangerous man, his fake hospitality instantly morphs into pure venom. The young woman clings to a cold metal stage pole, her knuckles flashing bone white, crying out that she is just a dancer, not property. Roman watches this tragic display without moving a single muscle. He sees the absolute truth now. She is a prisoner drowning in an ocean of organized cruelty. This teaches us a very human lesson. Courage is not always a loud, heroic roar. Sometimes, courage is just a terrified whisper clinging desperately to the edge of a stage. Roman steps into the harsh stage light, casting a long shadow over her trembling frame. His steady voice cuts right through her panic, laying out the brutal reality of what happens if she stays in this decaying hellhole. For a split second, her deep sorrow sparks into fierce anger. She glares up at him, demanding to know what fresh nightmare awaits if she walks out that door. Before Roman can offer even a sliver of safety, two massive thugs emerge from the shadows by the rear exit. You and I can see the immediate devastation in her eyes. All color instantly drains from her pale face. Her brief defiance crumbles into absolute, breathless submission. The real monsters have arrived. It is a harsh reminder that true despair hits when we finally realize the walls we built to protect ourselves have become our permanent prison. The heavy shadow of organized cruelty hangs over the silent room. She slowly steps down from the dirty platform, moving like a broken puppet on fraying strings. Standing just inches away, Roman clearly sees the angry red marks blossoming on her delicate wrist. He catches the faint scent of cheap soap on her skin, an innocent detail in a room built entirely on sin. He softly asks for her name. Serafina, she whispers. He locks that name deep in his mind, planting the first dark seed of a twisted bond that blooms when a savior is just as dangerous as the captor. Vincent weakly tries to stall them, but Roman freezes the man's blood with a single, dead stare. The time to walk out is right now. A vital lesson we must all learn is that hesitation in the face total darkness is really just another tragic form of surrender. Let us pause and look at her together. Serafina casts a frantic, trembling glance toward the squalid dressing rooms. Her exhausted nervous system is screaming, caught tightly in the cold grip of relentless trauma. Roman sees the rapid flutter of her dark eyes and quietly asks about her belongings. She whispers that she does not have enough money. A truly tragic confession from a girl perpetually locked in survival mode. The club's heavy enforcers step forward, wrapping the tense scene in silent intimidation. You see a brief flicker of hope in her eyes, crushed instantly by years of dark conditioning. When Roman tells her to move, she searches his stony face for the familiar cruelty she expects from all men. This shows us how deep trauma tragically teaches the wounded to fear the open door even more than the cage itself. The camera tightly focuses on Roman's chilling stoicism. He radiates a dangerous power completely absent of the filthy lust poisoning the club. This quiet restraint leaves Serafina deeply disoriented. He casually declares that the monsters guarding the door will not lay a single finger on her tonight, silencing the sweating manager with a simple glacial tilt of his head. Yet, right in the middle of this tense rescue, Serafina drops to her bruised knees to gather her scattered, crumpled bills from the floor. She clings to the dirty cash as if someone else's very survival depends entirely on it, her trembling chin raised high to hide her immense terror. It is a powerful reminder that true dignity is often found in the most desperate acts. We all desperately hold on to the smallest pieces of control when our entire world is falling apart. Notice how Serafina desperately clings to her last shred of human agency. Even drowning in this neon hell, she bravely refuses the filthy terms of her own purchase. But Roman smoothly flips the script, tossing down even more cash. He makes a terrifyingly poetic distinction, softly telling her he only bought her time, not her soul. It is a brilliant, beautifully dark manipulation. He acts as the noble savior while keeping the heavy, invisible chains firmly locked in his own hands. The dead silence in the room crowns him as the undisputed king. He turns and slowly walks away. For 3 agonizing seconds, Serafina is frozen in the blinding stage lights. A sharp movement from the thugs near the exit forces her hand, and she finally steps into his long shadow. We must always remember that true freedom is incredibly rare in this life. Sadly, the broken often just trade one terrifying cage for another. Step into this opening frame with me and watch how the atmosphere violently shifts. This is not a simple exit, it is a tactical extraction. Roman's guards form an imposing wall, a living monument to raw power. Under the buzzing, fractured neon lights, Serafina practically runs. Her trembling hands betray a deep, undeniable panic. Roman orders her to stay close, offering a fragile illusion of safety in a cramped hallway, thick with cheap perfume and desperate choices. The other girls watch her go. Some burn with obvious envy, while others fight back tears, recognizing the tragic exchange of one prison for another. We all learn this harsh truth eventually. Sometimes running away just means walking into a much darker room. Roman catches every glance, his dark eyes missing nothing. We have seen this tragic play unfold before. The weak man desperately trying to bargain with the wolf. Vincent steps into the harsh light, nervously calling Serafina a liability. Roman does not even raise his voice. He simply tilts his head, returning the threat with a quiet promise of absolute violence, and Vincent shrinks back into the shadows. As Roman and Serafina step into the freezing alley, the sudden silence is deafening. Serafina freezes. Her stalkers knew exactly which door she would take. 2 figures emerge from the pitch black, standing with the terrifying patience of hungry predators. To them, she is just property. The cruelest lesson of the underworld is simple. Abusers always expect their victims to remain completely broken and afraid to fight back. Notice how the camera pushes in tight as Roman steps smoothly between the trembling girl and the thugs. He does not shout or puff out his chest. He simply plants his feet, and the street turns to ice. When the enforcer dares to challenge him, Roman's lethal nature bleeds into the dim light. With terrifying calm, he declares that every soul in this city belongs to him. Watch Thug's face fall the second he recognizes the man he is dealing with. His arrogant posture crumbles into instant fear. Roman looks back at Serafina, seeing the heavy weight of trauma pulling her down. He asks for the exact number of her debt, turning her nightmare into a transaction. Life teaches us a sobering lesson. The most dangerous monsters do not roar. They simply whisper in the dark. Let us look at this sequence, piece by piece. You and I, Roman pushes the men to explain exactly what happens if she fails to pay. The thug spits out a thinly veiled threat, about someone else paying the price. Notice how the ambient audio drops away here, focusing entirely on the sudden, sharp catch in Serafina's throat. Roman hears it instantly. He has found her ultimate weak point, her mother. All of Serafina's hard, defensive armor shatters into pieces. She is not fighting for herself. She is bleeding to protect someone helpless. It is one of the most tragic facts of human nature. We will gladly walk through fire for the people we love, completely forgetting to save ourselves. Roman cuts the thug down with a soft voice, cementing his dark dominance over the freezing alley. Roman raises a single steady hand, ordering his armed guard to stand down. He craves the slow, tense theater of this exact moment. "Who do you work for?" he asks, his voice cutting cleanly through the damp air. The thin man's arrogant smile finally breaks. "A man who will not like being interrupted," the thug replies. Roman takes one measured step forward, swallowing the remaining light. "Then tell him he is already interrupted." The alley falls completely silent. Behind him, Serafina is visibly trembling, trapped in a waking nightmare. For months she has danced until her feet bled, hiding dark bruises from her mother. She survived purely on stolen breaths and dirty bills. The lesson here is cruel but honest. Exhaustion will eventually break even the strongest human spirit. A highly dangerous emotion washes over her pale face. That emotion is hope. Life teaches us a bitter truth. Hope is often what destroys us when it arrives before the storm has truly passed. Roman slowly turns his dark gaze to her, asking if these are the men threatening her. She freezes, her deep trauma choking her words, before finally whispering the name Victor Cade. In this brutal underworld, Victor is a known disease, feeding on desperate women with fake debts. Roman has his own twisted morals, and he hates this cheap cruelty. How much Roman demands, his voice sharp and cold. Serafina pulls her worn purse tightly against her chest like a fragile shield. "I do not know anymore," she cries out softly. "Every time I pay, they change the rules just to break me." Notice how the camera framing positions Roman here. He stands like a dark god in a world where fear is the only currency. Serafina is drowning under her father's past mistakes, completely trapped. Roman steps closer to the enforcers, his body language perfectly calm, effortlessly claiming her as his own. When a thug foolishly reaches for a gun, the tension violently snaps. Roman does not even pull a weapon. Instead, he drops his voice to a chilling, hollow whisper. It is a brilliant psychological trick meant to freeze a man's beating heart. He promises to end their lives without a single drop of emotion. The thug's hands slowly come up empty. Stick with me, because this exact moment of terrifying rescue is where the quiet poison of a trauma bond truly begins to spread. The thugs quickly back away, leaving Serafina with a silent, hateful glare. The very second they vanish, her survival adrenaline turns off, and her knees buckle. Roman reaches out to catch her, and her entire body violently flinches. It is truly heartbreaking to watch. The tragic reflex of a girl who expects every human touch to bring pain. When he lets her go and promises not to hurt her, her broken spirit finally speaks up. She whispers that he bought her. Roman smoothly spins the narrative, telling her he merely paid to open a locked door. We all want a savior, but the cruel lesson here is that the devil often wears the face of a rescuer. She desperately wants to feel safe in his shadow, unaware she has planted her feet where dark, dangerous obsessions grow. This scene paints a terrible, vivid picture of a trapped soul. Serafina's voice trembles as she mentions the danger to her mother. Roman does not offer any warm human comfort. Instead, he coldly states that the entire syndicate now answers to him. It is the chilling arrogance of a powerful man who looks at known murderers and sees only insects. The camera lingers on Serafina as she watches him walk toward his waiting car. Is she merely trading a filthy cage for a golden one? The tragedy of human survival teaches us that we rarely choose true freedom. We simply grab the hand that keeps us breathing until tomorrow. Exhausted and completely out of viable options, she slowly follows him into the dark night, unknowingly handing over the last broken pieces of her free will. Before stepping into the car, Serafina casts one last haunted look back at the hell she is leaving behind. The heavy door shuts with a solid thud, sealing them inside a quiet, leather-scented bubble. She sits completely frozen, her knuckles turning white as she clutches her cheap bag like a life preserver. She is bracing for his cruel demands. But Roman plays a masterstroke of psychological control. He does absolutely nothing. The silence stretches out, growing heavy and cold. He sits in the shadows, letting his dark eyes trace her trembling frame. The lesson we learn here is that true power never has to announce itself. By giving her no rules, he leaves her entirely lost, watching her not as a romantic fantasy, but as a terrified bird locked inside a brand new cage. The passing streetlights drift across her skin as Roman silently takes her apart with his cinematic gaze. He notes her torn dress, the deep bruising on her wrists, and the chipped nail polish of a girl who has fought far too hard for too long. His eyes lock onto her anchor, the crumpled bag of cash. When he asks about the money, her shoulders snap up in defense. She admits she only has $1,200 against a crushing demand of $25,000 by sunrise. Roman processes this with the cold speed of an apex predator. He sees the ugly truth hidden behind the impossible numbers. The cruel reality of life is that some debts are designed strictly to drown you. They built a mountain she could never climb, slowly breaking her will until she handed over her soul. Watch how this final realization washes over her. When Roman asks what happens if she fails to pay, Serafina whispers her deepest fear, her mother. A terrifying shadow passes over Roman's face. Out of habit, Serafina immediately blames herself, assuming he is judging her for not going to the police. But Roman dismisses the law completely. He coldly states that half the badges in his city belong to him. His city. That possessive phrase hangs in the heavy air. We watch the tragic gears turning in Serafina's exhausted mind. She remembers the armed men bowing in the dirt. The hard lesson hits her like a physical blow, reminding us all that there are no fairy tales here. She was never rescued by a kind stranger. She was simply claimed by the biggest monster of them all. Let us look at this opening frame together. The camera lingers in the shadows of the car, catching the moment Serafina's breath snags in her throat. Streetlights slice across her trembling face as she demands his name. Roman sits swallowed by the dark, his voice a terrifying rumble. He studies her with unblinking calculation. With one quiet command, he orders his men to secure her mother's clinic. That single sentence shatters her years of lonely survival. Tears blur her vision. She fights them back, but Roman catalogs every tremor of her breaking spirit. We all learn this painful truth eventually. The heaviest walls we build to protect ourselves often crumble the fastest when someone finally offers a genuine place to hide. Roman leans forward, the heavy leather seat creaking in the quiet car. He tells her it is fine to be terrified. By validating her instinct, he builds a dangerous bridge between them. His voice carries the cold resonance of a man familiar with ruin, cutting straight to her core. The camera cuts across the city to a smoke-filled room. An unseen adversary slowly loads a weapon, aware of the prize Roman just claimed. Serafina is no random victim. She is the buried secret in a bitter blood feud between true monsters. Roman believes he merely rescued a desperate girl, having no idea he just lit the match that will burn his empire down. It reminds us of a quiet reality. We rarely see the avalanche coming when we casually pick up a single ordinary stone. The massive iron gates part slowly in the dark, opening like the jaws of a starving beast. Serafina sits entirely frozen in her seat. She is the hidden trigger destined to draw psychopaths out of the shadows. Roman remains blind to the violent storm he just invited inside. As the tires crunch heavily over the gravel, Serafina's mind races through fatal scenarios. She knows from bitter experience that wealth only makes human cruelty more creative. Men like Roman do not yell. They destroy you with a perfectly polite smile. Seeing his armed guards bow in perfect synchronization sends a spike of ice through her veins. She is stepping straight into a gilded cage. It is a haunting truth we must accept. The most beautiful prisons in this world are always the ones that break your mind, long before they ever touch your body. Watch Serafina clutch her worn bag tightly against her chest, her eyes darting across the heavy shadows. Every nerve in her fragile body screams that she has merely traded a filthy cage for a flawless trap. Roman steps out onto the pavement. He does not reach for her. He simply states that she is safe here. But to a heart broken by trauma, a promise of safety sounds exactly like a beautiful lie. The mansion rises before them, devoid of cheap flash. It is cold stone and heavy glass, the architectural mirror of a man who controls absolutely everything. He walks across the marble floors with the silent grace of a wolf returning to its den. We learn a bitter lesson about survival from this. True danger never announces itself with a sudden roar. It always arrives with a perfectly calm, quiet invitation. The camera captures a deeply tragic contrast. Serafina stands in her ruined dress against a towering hall of pristine marble. The staff moves around Roman like silent ghosts. A housekeeper spots the bruised girl, hiding her shock a second too late. Roman catches it instantly, commanding her to prepare the top-floor guest suite. It is a calculated isolation tactic. Serafina's exhausted mind jumps to the only logic she knows. She laughs, the sound thick with jagged despair, accusing him of paying for her body. A dangerous shadow passes over Roman's cold eyes. He does not see himself as a common buyer of flesh. He sees himself as a dark savior, the architect of her new reality. It is a strange paradox of our own survival. The people who pull us from the absolute dark often become the exact ones we fear losing the most. The lighting turns stark as Roman steps closer. He claims he paid to get her out, spinning a hostile abduction into a heroic rescue. Serafina steps back, her breathing shallow, whispering that he is worse than the others. Roman does not deny it. True monsters never hide their shadows. They wear them like iron armor. He replies, quietly, that if he wanted to harm her, he would not be explaining himself. It is a masterful trap, tricking her into viewing his basic restraint as genuine mercy. Celeste steps forward with a warm robe, offering a gentle touch. Serafina's panic flares high, choking out that she will not sleep in his bed. The guards tense up in the shadows. Let us remember this quiet warning. Mercy from a practiced predator is never truly free. Roman states she is not sleeping in his room, his voice a dead, terrifying calm. When she demands to know why she is here, he drops his heaviest weapon. He already knows everything. He explains that Victor, the man hunting her, will undoubtedly tear her apartment apart tonight. Men like Roman do not react to chaos. They map the entire chessboard before the game begins. Serafina's fragile reality shatters. The terrifying thought of her vulnerable mother hits her like a physical blow. But Roman casually cuts the last string tying her to the outside world, revealing he already sent armed men to the clinic. By securing the only person she loves, he achieves absolute control over her soul. We often surrender our freedom willingly when the heavy iron cage is presented to us as an impenetrable shield. Serafina stares at him, her defensive walls reduced to dust. She whispers that he does not even know her. Roman's dark eyes lock onto hers, stating simply that he knows enough. For a girl who has lived her entire life feeling invisible, being deeply seen by a dangerous man is an intoxicating drug that bypasses all logic. Celeste guides her up the curving staircase. Serafina's legs feel like lead. She is drained, yet her heart hammers wildly against her ribs. Let us pause here together, you and I. This is the tragic beat where the captive begins to romanticize the monster. She steps into the guest suite, the heavy door closing firmly behind her. It is a gilded cage designed to make her old life feel utterly meaningless. True captivity always begins the exact moment we finally stop looking for an exit. The grand suite is engineered to overwhelm her senses with flawless stone and a level of luxury she could never afford. Celeste sets down fresh clothes and hot food. Serafina's exhausted mind cannot process a gift without searching for a hidden price. She asks why they are being nice, her voice cracking. The housekeeper delivers a soft dose of validation, murmuring that Roman never brings women here. The staff always plays their part perfectly, spinning the grand illusion that the captive is a rare prize. Celeste steps out and the heavy door clicks shut. The silence that follows is total and suffocating. Stripped of the violent noise from the club, Serafina is left alone with the terrifying echo of her own heartbeat. The loudest battles we face always happen in the quietest rooms. Left alone, Serafina falls back on her oldest habit. She counts her crumpled money, $1,140. In the ruthless underworld, it is merely dust. It cannot save her mother. The truth hits her like an iron pick. Her nervous system finally breaks. Her hands shake violently, dropping the worn bills across the cold marble. She collapses, a terrible sob ripping fiercely from her throat. This is the haunting sound of a soul shattering under the weight of terror. Crying in a monster's fortress feels exactly like bleeding in front of a starving shark. A sharp knock suddenly echoes against the wood. She scrambles up, desperately scrubbing the tears from her face, burying the pain. A broken spirit always learns to hide its fragile pieces quickly, just to survive. The cart holds only warm soup, fresh bread, and tea. There are no extravagant gifts. It is just profound, calculated comfort. Kindness from a predator is far more dangerous than his physical cruelty. Cruelty is a raised fist you can easily brace against. Kindness slips quietly under your skin and permanently rewrites your deepest loyalties. Beside the bowl sits a note in sharp ink, ordering her to eat and sleep. Serafina's mind screams to resist, but her starving body betrays her. The warm taste of the broth almost makes her weep, planting a toxic seed of gratitude for her captor. Downstairs in the shadowed study, the master of the house calmly goes back to work. Roman stands by the heavy glass window, coldly flipping through files. The psychological trap is perfectly set. Dominic steps into the dark study. He reports that Serafina's mother is guarded, but outside, Victor's syndicate is tearing the city apart to find the girl. Roman's eyes narrow in the heavy shadows. He murmurs that they are not looking for money. He perfectly understands the grim mechanics of the underworld. A minor debt is merely a fake leash. Victor did not want cash. He wanted her terrified and compliant, because Serafina is tied to something infinitely more valuable. Roman is not keeping her upstairs out of kindness. He is securing a powerful asset. Stick with me here, because this changes everything. We are watching two ruthless sociopaths play a high-stakes game of chess. In any war of ego, the most profound casualties are always the innocent pieces caught in the middle. The camera lingers in the dim office, framing Dominic as he watches the usually cold rhythm of Roman's breathing. For years he has seen this man carve up territories without blinking. But Serafina is a blinding disruption in this dark cinematic frame. "Are you planning to keep her here?" Dominic asks. Roman freezes, trying to brush her off as mere collateral. "She is not a tool," Roman snaps, the words tearing out of his throat. His untouchable armor is cracking. You and I can see what he refuses to admit. We learn here that human attachment is the one chaotic force pure logic can never truly control. Sensing the dangerous shift, Dominic pivots. "I pulled what I could on Victor," he says smoothly, exposing the predator's sprawling web of phantom fronts. Victor specifically targeted isolated women. As Dominic speaks, the harsh light catches Roman's face turning to absolute stone. "And nobody told me?" he demands, his voice trembling. His rage is not for the victims. but the bleeding wound of a king realizing another predator is hunting in his woods. His illusion of total control is shattering. Dominic hesitates, handing over a folder of crumbling ledgers from Roman's father. Roman scans the brittle pages, his chest tightening as he confronts an unchangeable past. It teaches us a harsh reality. No man can ever truly outrun the dark ghosts of his own family bloodline. Suddenly, his hollow eyes lock onto a single name, Marrow, Serafina's father. Beside an emergency cash advance sits a heavy, familiar crest. It was the private mark of his father. Dominic watches a dangerous twitch in Roman's jaw. "It means her father borrowed from my father," Roman states, his voice flat to choke back the rising rage. "Or someone engineered it to look that way," Dominic counters. For a boss demanding total authority, this invisible attack is unbearable. Upstairs, Serafina stands under scalding water, desperate to scrub the filthy residue of the club from her skin. But hot water never washes away deep trauma. Staring into the mirror, her theatrical armor melts. It reminds us of a quiet truth. Exhaustion always strips away our false masks, leaving only our most fragile selves. She is just a terrified daughter gripping the cold porcelain sink. Then, a sharp knock rattles the heavy wood. Her body flinches, panic flooding her veins. "Who is it?" she calls out. "Roman," comes the heavy reply. She opens the door an inch, using the wood as a flimsy shield. He stands there with sleeves rolled up, his predatory edge sharp in the dim light. "Your mother is safe for now," he says. Serafina lets out a broken breath. "For now?" she whispers, fear rushing back. He warns her that Victor will try again. Her mind snaps to its dark baseline. "Then I have to go back to the club," she says. This highlights a tragic reality. We often run back into our familiar cages to avoid the terror of the unknown. Roman stares at her, thrown. "You think I brought you here to send you back?" "You cannot protect me forever," she replies weakly. "I do not need forever, I need tonight. Look at this frame with me." Notice the arrogance radiating from his posture. He believes his shadow alone can hold back the dark. "You do not understand," she begs. "If I do not pay, they do not stop." Roman steps closer, suffocating the space. Then maybe it is time he met a man who does more than scare him. Serafina freezes, caught between running and trusting this dangerous savior. His eyes drift to the crumpled bills on the bed. "You were counting again," he says softly. Her face flushes with shame. "It is none of your business." "It became my business when they threatened your mother." He fires back. "Why?" she snaps. This teaches us that anger is often a fragile shield we raise when we are simply too exhausted to feel fear anymore. The room's tension is suffocating. "Why do you care?" she demands. "Because you wanted to feel like a hero." Roman remains still, a cold tactician. Do not mistake restraint for vanity. His voice drops to a whisper. "I care because I know what happens to women Victor targets, and because he is using a debt tied to my family." Her body shrinks back as if struck. "Your family?" This reminds us of a profound life truth. Our hidden past always finds a way to bleed into the present. "Your father's debt may have started with mine," Roman confesses. "My father never said that," she cries, voice breaking. "Would he have?" Roman asks softly. The question is a jagged dagger, slicing through the fragile illusions she held about her father's manic, delusional final years. Gabriel spent his final years hiding bills and making whispered phone calls. He left Serafina to face the monsters alone. For years, her resentment was her only fuel. Now, Roman shifts the narrative. "Why would your father lend money to mine?" she asks. "That is what I am trying to find out," he says smoothly. "And if you do find out?" she whispers. Roman's eyes darken with lethal certainty. "Then I decide who pays for what happened to you." Logic dictates she should run from the man tied to her ruin, yet she steps aside. We learn an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes a wounded soul will willingly step into a dangerous fire to avoid dying in the freezing cold. She lets him in. As Roman crosses her threshold, his heavy presence irreversibly alters the room's fragile atmosphere. Notice his dark eyes sweeping the bedroom. You and I can clearly see what he is cataloging. The flimsy robe, the desperate stacks of cash, the way her body leans toward the door. "Sit," he commands softly. Her instinct is to fight, but her exhausted body obeys. She perches on the edge of the chair. Here is the tragic beauty of his control. Rather than towering over her, Roman crouches down, lowering his profile. "Start from the beginning," he murmurs. "No protecting your father. Tell me exactly how this started." Beneath his focused stillness, her walls finally shatter. We see that true healing often begins the moment we stop pretending we are unbreakable. Defying logic, she speaks, using the cold math of medical debts as a safe doorway into the overwhelming darkness of her trauma. Her nightmare began where so many tragedies do. With the sickness of a loved one, the medical bills drained everything, leaving her exposed to the wolves. The enforcers smiled at first, claiming her father owed a simple family debt. But when she missed their impossible deadlines, the masks vanished. They invaded her home, proving they watched her mother's clinic. It was an absolute siege of her mind. This reveals a brutal truth. The highest price we ever pay is often the cost of our own survival. Roman listens to her confession in dead silence. His features freeze into pure ice as she whispers the lies Vincent used to lure her in. Just dancing, quick money, private clients if you choose. It is the exact, sickening poetry monsters used to buy and sell human souls. In the heavy light, a twitch in Roman's jaw is the only crack in his marble facade. He begins to speak, but words die in his throat, sparing her the brutal question. She lifts her chin in fragile defiance. "No," she whispers. "Vincent said you were available," Roman murmurs. She looks away. "Vincent says whatever makes men open their wallets. You believed him?" Roman nods. "At first." A flush of shame rises in her cheeks. "Of course you did." Roman's voice drops softly. "But I stopped believing him before you stepped off that stage." She stares, breathless. "Why?" He delivers the truth. "Because you look like someone trying not to break apart." You and I learn a truth here. Real empathy sees through our thickest armor. That is the exact moment her world shatters. Watch her carefully. What flashes across her eyes is not trust, but something far more dangerous. Relief, her walls crack. Roman steps back, unable to bear the rawness of her grief. "There is something else," she breathes. Trembling fingers pull a tarnished silver pendant from her collar. "My father gave me this when I was 16, a week before he vanished." Roman's gaze sharpens, the protector morphing back into a predator. "What is it?" "I do not know," she whispers. "He begged me never to lose it. Said if anyone asked about his debts, I must never mention this." Roman recognizes the signature of hidden sins. It teaches us that the secrets our parents bury often become the heavy chains we must wear. "Did they come asking?" He presses softly. Serafina lowers her head, hiding tears. "A man came, right after he disappeared." She speaks of a stranger at their door, claiming to be a lawyer. When his eyes landed on her necklace, the color drained from his face. Her lie bought her life. Roman steps forward, hesitating inches away. "May I?" he asks. She nods, passing the metal into his scarred hands. He traces the worn edges. "This opens," he murmurs. She shakes her head. "No, it never has." But his fingers find the invisible seam. "This is not jewelry," he says, a tragic weight pulling his words down. "It is a vessel." Her breath catches. "For what?" Roman's eyes meet hers, maybe for the reason Victor is willing to bleed a girl dry over an endless debt. We learn a haunting lesson. Sometimes what we cling to for comfort is what destroys us. The silence is suffocating. She faces the truth that she wears a death warrant around her neck. Picture this with me. The pristine image Serafina held of her father instantly turns to ash. She whispers into the suffocating air, begging to know if he truly buried a secret inside the artifact. Roman studies her with the tragic logic of a man raised in the dark. He states plainly that predators do not hunt a sick woman over $25,000 unless she holds a hidden fortune. Suddenly, His phone buzzes. Dominic reports 2 false medics attempted a grab at the clinic. Her mother is safe, but one escaped. Serafina stifles a terrified sob, her shoulders shaking. Roman narrows his dark eyes and asks if they left a message. Sudden chaos always strips away our comforting illusions, proving the truth we try to ignore will always find us. Dominic hesitates before answering the heavy question. He reveals the bleeding man claimed the debt was never about money, but rather about the exact item her father stole. Panic rises in her chest like a tidal wave as she desperately denies it, whispering that her father was simply not that kind of man. Roman corrects her with a mournful gaze, pointing out that whatever was taken, the ruthless hunters still have not found it. He lets out a long sigh, reminding her she never truly knew what kind of man her father became in the end. It is a heartbreaking reality we all face. We build perfect versions of the people we love, but true maturity requires us to accept them for the deeply flawed humans they actually were. His devastating truth slices right through her armor. She glares at him with absolute hatred, hands trembling as she commands him to leave. Roman blinks, genuinely thrown off balance by the rare rejection. Her voice cracks under the weight of betrayal, accusing him of tying her father's sins to his violent bloodline. Bitter tears spill down her cheeks. Roman stands perfectly still. For a fleeting second, the ruthless boss vanishes, leaving behind a man filled with aching regret. He sets the pendant gently on the table, softly asking her to lock the door. She sinks to the cold floor in the quiet dark, sobbing into her hands. Sometimes being unmade by pain is the only way forward. We must break down entirely before we can find the quiet strength to rebuild our shattered lives. The crushing debt and Roman's shadow form a suffocating web. Serafina sees the tragic truth. She is drowning in a relentless cycle of violence passed down from father to child. The irony is staggering. The only man capable of protecting her is tied to the monsters who ruined her family. Down in the dim study, Roman paces like a caged beast, radiating suppressed fury before slamming the ledger onto his desk. He stands with Julian, a clinical profiler operating without a moral compass. This is no longer just business. Julian dissects the life of Gabriel Marrow, a simple courier holding the bloody keys to a 15-year-old nightmare. It serves as a stark reminder. The ghosts of our past are never truly buried, and eventually, every hidden secret will demand a final reckoning. In the cold glow of the study lamps, Julian lays out the harsh facts about Serafina's father. The file reveals a flood of dirty money, followed by a frantic attempt to erase his own existence. These are the desperate actions of a man cornered by crushing medical bills. Roman freezes in absolute stillness when Julian explains Gabriel ran packages for Roman's own father. Julian slides a grainy photograph across the desk, capturing both their fathers together, while a third figure lurks in the shadows. The sheer malice of the third man bleeds right through the paper. It is a snapshot of tragedy, the exact moment poison entered their lives. The lesson here is ancient. The unhealed wounds and reckless choices of one generation always become the heavy burdens of the next. Stick with me here. As the face sharpens, reality twists into something much worse. It is Victor Cade. Victor is not just a parasite feeding on this tragedy, he is the architect. Julian murmurs that a desperate Gabriel must have stolen something valuable from him. Roman looks toward the ceiling, thinking of the locked room where Serafina weeps alone. A guard suggests they force the artifact from her immediately. Roman snaps a sharp refusal. He insists she must be walked to the truth, not dragged. His men assume it is merely a cold tactical play. But we see the truth beneath his armor. This ruthless kingpin is falling in love. It reminds us that real strength is never about forcing compliance, but having the patience to let someone offer their trust freely. Upstairs, the heavy silence is broken only by Serafina's ragged breathing. She sits on the bed, the pendant resting like a stone in her palm. She agonizes over whether her father was a victim or the villain all along. We must remember a simple truth. The torture of not knowing will rot a soul faster than a painful reality ever could. She whispers a prayer for her mother. The door creaks open, but Roman does not enter with the stride of a mob boss. He steps softly into the dim light, holding a steaming cup of tea. It is a stunning human gesture. He is dismantling her terror, offering quiet warmth to a woman who has known nothing but bitter cold. It proves that even in the darkest of spaces, a single act of genuine care can rewrite the rules of survival. Her tear-stained eyes dart toward him, suspicious of the offering. She demands to know why a man of violence is acting with care. Roman looks at his scarred hands, admitting he does not understand it himself. We watch two broken souls attempt to bind their wounds. His raw honesty slips past her defenses faster than any lie could. He hands her the file, not as a master giving orders, but as an equal sharing the burden of truth. He tells her not to trust the folder blindly, becoming the only anchor in her shattering world. She opens it to find the tragic map of a man losing his mind, crumbled receipts, and one haunting photograph of a rusted storage door. It serves as a profound reminder. In a world full of deception, shared vulnerability is the only foundation for lasting trust. The camera pushes in on Serafina as her traumatic fog parts, revealing a glaring image. She envisions a broken vending machine buzzing under the sickly yellow lights of a desolate storage yard. She sees her father, sweat beads on his forehead, hands shaking as he grips her shoulders, begging for absolute secrecy. It is a quiet tragedy. When we force a child to carry the dark secrets of adults, we permanently fracture their soul. Her lips part as the memory solidifies, and she whispers an old code aloud, a B and a 17. In the adjacent room, bathed in the harsh glow of monitors, Roman and his associate freeze. The audio feed crackles loudly. What was just a tragic echo of a lost childhood has suddenly become the exact tactical key they need to survive the coming war. The tension sharpens to a razor edge as Roman calculates their shrinking window of time. If their rival knows about the artifact, he is already hunting for that storage unit. Shivering in a damp robe, Serafina waits. The harsh light catches her bare shoulders, yet Roman's gaze remains clinical. He tosses her dark clothes meant for a midnight escape, muttering a dry remark about his partner, always predicting disaster. Then, the unexpected happens. Serafina laughs. It is a small, fractured sound, echoing against the concrete walls, but it marks a monumental shift. She is no longer just a frightened captive waiting for the end. It teaches us a vital lesson. Finding a spark of humor in our darkest moments is often the first step toward reclaiming our power and surviving the chaos. You and I know how a single quiet moment can rewrite a room. When that genuine laugh escapes her lips, the heavy air shifts. Roman has built his life on emotional ice, viewing attachment as a fatal flaw. He knows he should have smashed the pendant to take the data. Instead, he waits, silently needing her to hand it over willingly. It is a tragic truth of the human heart. The second we choose another person's emotional survival over our own strict rules, we expose our throats to the blade. When Serafina steps out of the shadows, stripped of her walls, she is breathtakingly real. For one terrifying beat, the killer simply stares, forgetting the bloody game he is supposed to be playing. It is a reminder that love has the power to disarm even the most dangerous among us. Serafina stands under the dim hallway bulb, her vulnerability laid bare. Catching his lingering gaze, she crosses her arms in a subtle flinch of survival. Roman clears his throat, fighting to hide the hammering in his chest, offering a clumsy remark. The lines between captor and savior blur. As they step toward the stairs, the illusion shatters. The floor below is a war zone, his men quietly loading weapons. Out in the city, a rival plans their slaughter, while a silent traitor within Roman's walls waits to strike. Neither knows the place they are rushing toward will break their reality forever. Listen to this haunting, Lesson. No matter how much we wish to retreat into the safety of a quiet moment, the brutal battles of the real world always come crashing through our door. Her father witnessed a truth that demanded his last breath. As Roman and Serafina move through this deadly game, the boundary between a guardian's duty and a tyrant's obsession dissolves. It brings us to a devastating realization. Genuine affection cannot survive when choked by the weeds of absolute control. Soon she will witness the brutality he unleashes when his possessions are threatened. Yet, captivated by the tragic gravity of each other, they fail to notice the creeping doom. In the shadows, a desperate traitor watches. A glowing screen illuminates a sweat-slicked face, sending a silent beacon to summon an army to the rusted gates. The message finds a phantom rival whose very name would have driven Roman to murder without a single moment of hesitation. Miles away, a solitary figure waits in the pitch black. A chilling smile creeps across his face, while his fingers slide ammunition into a heavy rifle. We cut back to Roman and Serafina stepping into a desolate storage yard. The biting wind transforms a simple search into a nightmare. You and I have probably felt this specific kind of silence before. It is that suffocating stillness that arrives right before a tragedy. Rusted doors line the path like forgotten tombs of generational trauma. Roman scatters enforcers to hunt the perimeter, his dark eyes piercing the gloom. Beside him, Serafina trembles, her knuckles bleach bone white around her father's pendant, her breathing completely frantic. It leaves us with a painful truth. We can never outpace the demons we refuse to confront. The sharp stench of decaying rust overwhelms Serafina. In a flash, she is dragged back to her childhood, feeling the phantom weight of her father pressing her into the dark, pleading with her to hide. That innocent confusion morphs into an agonizing panic. Roman stands still, observing the microscopic quiver of her jaw. He moves just close enough to anchor her spiraling thoughts, his presence acting as a dark gravity. "Do you recognize anything?" he asks. Fighting through the fog, she faintly recalls a broken vending machine and a burnt-out bulb. Roman signals his crew to tap the cameras. He pins her with a relentless stare. "Think," he commands softly. It is a vital warning for us all. The most soothing words are very often the invisible chains of absolute dominance. Roman pushes her deeper into the memory. Serafina shuts her eyes, regressing to a terrified little girl. The ghostly echo of her father's forced laughter fills her ears, a sound designed to mask his paralyzing fear. She visualizes his shaking fingers, tracing a cryptic code onto her palm. B-71, she declares with sudden clarity. That was her ultimate lifeline. Roman instantly orders his enforcers to sweep the maze for that unit. They vanish into the suffocating gloom. Serafina is unraveling, her heartbeat violently pulsing against her pale skin. Still, Roman remains beside her, an imposing fortress of dark calm. It is a tragic display of a trauma bond forming. In our most vulnerable moments of panic, we willingly chain our survival to the very monsters who could easily drown us. You and I should look closely at this exact moment. As Roman guides her, Serafina's terror rots into a desperate trust in this violent man. They arrive at Unit B-71. A corroded padlock secures the door like a sealed crypt of grief. Roman lifts heavy cutters, but Serafina halts him. Her hands shake as she unclasps her pendant, recalling how her father would obsessively tap it when his world fell apart. Roman accepts the necklace, analyzing it with the focus of an assassin. He turns it over, revealing a microscopic carving of the storage number. Serafina drops to the concrete, crushed by the revelation. "It is a key," Roman murmurs into the dark. It captures a brutal human reality. Our most agonizing burdens are almost always camouflaged as precious gifts of love. Roman shatters the lock. The snap pierces the silence. He forces the rusted door upward, exhaling damp decay and buried sins. A dying bulb flickers to expose the pathetic truth of her father's existence. No hidden wealth. Just a dented cabinet, a fireproof box, and rotting cardboard. Serafina steps across the threshold, walking into the deception that poisoned her childhood. Roman glides behind her, a dark shadow. Dominic barks a warning from the doorway, but she hears nothing. Her eyes are glued to that metal box. She stands frozen, fighting a losing war to merge the father she worshipped with the stranger he actually was. We all must swallow this jagged pill. The true heartbreak of growing up is discovering our towering childhood idols were always just terrified, broken people. Julian steps out of the gloom, his flashlight slicing the dust. Roman remains in the shadows, commanding them to open the safe first. Watch how Serafina's hands shake as she hesitates, her fingers strangling the pendant. It highlights a tragic human reflex. We instinctively cling to the familiar pain we know, terrified of the unknown truth. Julian locates a concealed ridge. A snap echoes off the concrete. Lying inside on rotted velvet is a tiny brass key. For her entire life, she carried the architect of her trauma against her beating heart. It proves a profound lesson. The emotional weights we refuse to put down are frequently the exact instruments required for our freedom. Roman's stoic face breaks with a brief smile. Julian twists the brass, and the steel surrenders with a heavy clack. Under the dim light sit two artifacts of ruin, a silver flash drive and yellowing papers. Julian reaches for the documents. The color drains from his face. Roman drags the ledger across the desk, scanning the ink. Gabriel Marrow's signature rests next to Roman's own father. But the third name makes Roman's jaw bulge, Luca Santoro, the brother he trusted more than God himself. Dominic exhales a devastated curse. Serafina's voice fractures as she begs to know who Luca is. Roman refuses to sugarcoat the horror. You and I know exactly how this story goes, do we not? The most fatal wounds are never inflicted by nameless enemies. The monsters that tear your life apart are always the friends you welcome to eat at your own table. Julian grabs the next page, trembling in the silence. Julian's voice barely breaks the silence. This book is a fully loaded weapon. Gabriel was coerced into burying their venomous sins. A sharp gasp rips from Serafina's throat. She stares at Roman, whose knuckles have gone white, gripping the desk. He is paralyzed by a handwritten memo from his own father. The ink coldly dictates that Gabriel was terrified, and his silence needed to be permanently secured. Roman reads the betrayal 3 times. Serafina stares at the paper, watching her universe vaporize. Was he a thief? She asks. Julian shakes his head. Gabriel was not stealing. He was forging a shield to keep his daughter alive. It teaches us a haunting lesson. What the world labels as cowardice is often just a terrified parent crossing every moral line to ensure their child sees tomorrow. Roman remains mute, rolling the cold metal drive in his scarred palm. The devastating reality clicks. Gabriel signed his execution warrant the second he hoarded these documents. A tear escapes Serafina's eye. Her father was no coward. He was a fortress absorbing the danger. She reaches for the drive, but Julian snaps that they are exposed. Roman slides the metal into his coat. Then the quiet violently shatters. A rifle round tears through the night, punching a jagged hole through the steel door an inch from Serafina's face. She drops to the concrete. Roman moves with the fluidity of a shadow. His arm hooks her waist, dragging her behind the cabinet, while Dominic fires into the dark. The yard detonates into a hellscape of exploding glass. It forces us to accept a cruel reality. The peace we cling to is often just an illusion. It is merely a held breath before the true nightmare begins. The roar of engines erupts outside. Dominic screams over the gunfire. They walked blindly into an orchestrated slaughter. Roman's eyes narrow, processing the brutal betrayal. Someone inside his circle sold him out. Serafina presses her spine against the concrete, convulsing with terror. Roman hovers over her, using his broad back to block the jagged shrapnel. Her fingers bury themselves in her necklace as her childhood illusions burn to ash. Strip away the tailored suits, and this is all that remains. just primal violence. The harshest reality of human nature is undeniable. The elegant masks we wear always melt away the second our survival is challenged. While mercenaries flood the perimeter, Roman operates with a disturbing calm. He flashes a hand signal. Without hesitation, Dominic drops an advancing assassin with one thunderous shot. Another body hits the dirt with a heavy thud. Julian scrambles behind a van, clutching the ledger. Roman pivots, muzzle flashes, lighting up his sharp jaw, and orders Serafina to bolt toward Dominic. Instead, her pale fingers dig fiercely into his dark sleeve. He snarls that this is not a negotiation. But Serafina wields her panic like a blade, screaming over the gunfire for him to stop treating her like luggage. Stick with me because you and I are watching a real shift. A dark pride softens the ice in Roman's eyes. He tells her she should be afraid. She whispers she is terrified. Then, use it, he growls. It shows a simple truth. Our deepest strength is often buried right under our worst fear. Roman rises, dropping a shadow with 2 flawless shots. Run, he roars. She runs, boots sliding on wet gravel. Dominic catches her trembling body behind a rusted truck, forcing the cold weight of a pistol into her numb fingers. Kneeling in the damp mud, the fragile girl she used to be shatters into pieces. We all face this bit truth eventually. Nobody is coming to save you until you decide to fight for your own breath. She presses her spine against a tire, her wide eyes locked on Roman. Muzzle flashes paint him in harsh bursts of orange. He does not give in to blind rage. Instead, he moves like a dark conductor, leading a violent symphony, placing every bullet perfectly to build a wall around her. Watching this ruin should have made her sick, but it pulls her in. It is the raw birth of a dark devotion, taking root in the bloody soil of a deadly war zone. Let us look at this piece by piece. You and I, the deafening roar of gunfire finally fades into a haunting, hollow echo. A single attacker breaks rank to flee, but Julian stops Roman cold. He screams his name, holding out a vibrating phone. Roman snatches the device. The smooth, arrogant voice of Luca Santoro slithers through the tiny speaker, sounding totally detached from the blood and dirt. Luca casually mocks Roman for his bleeding heart, laying bare a grim fact of life. When you live among monsters, holding on to your empathy just paints a massive target on your back. The camera holds on Roman's clenched fist. He squeezes the phone so hard his knuckles pop, hot rage flooding his veins. Luca just laughs. To him, destroying a family is no different than collecting an old, dusty debt. Luca reveals the cold architecture of his empire. Debts are never meant to be settled, he explains. They are kept open to force families to their knees. Serafina sags against the truck, her eyes totally hollow. Roman buries his mounting fury behind a mask of pure stone. His voice a low threat as he demands to know where Luciana is. Through the line, Luca takes a theatrical breath, savoring the poison he is about to spit. He preys on a simple human flaw. We put far too much blind faith in anyone holding official papers. A devastating scream tears from Serafina. The yard ambush was just smoke and mirrors. While Roman fought ghosts outside, Luca's men simply walked right through the hospital doors. Misplaced trust is always the deadliest weapon forged against us. The reality of Luciana vanishing drains the oxygen from the yard. Serafina chokes on the heavy air, panic clawing at her throat. Roman lowers the phone. His face still blank, a chilling canvas of dead emotion. "You told me she was safe," she whispers. Roman steps forward, swearing he will bring her back. "You cannot promise that," she screams, her grief finally exploding. He stands perfectly still, letting her raw agony wash over him. True strength means absorbing the jagged pain of the people you protect. "Listen to me," he commands, his voice dropping into a dark rumble. Luca made a mistake. She looks up, her hands shaking. What mistake? Roman steps in close, his shadow covering her completely. We are always the most vulnerable, the exact second we think we have finally won. Stick with me here, we are about to see what really went down. He made this personal, Roman says, slicing through her terror. What does that mean? She asks. Roman stares down at her, dark eyes unblinking. It means I am done talking. He never raises his voice. It is the chilling promise of a man getting ready to burn the city to ash. Always beware of quiet anger, because it is the most destructive force on earth. Dominic shouts out a target by the river. We strike first, Roman declares. Julian holds up the flash drive. Roman orders everyone to his estate, the only fortress left that can survive this storm. An hour later, bathed in the cold blue light of his study monitors, they uncover a systemic rot far darker than they ever imagined. The pale monitor light washes over their faces, revealing a digital web of absolute evil. Folders expose years of deep institutional rot. At the center sits Luca Santoro, flashing the untouchable arrogance of a king. Footage catches Victor Cade, trading human lives like cheap cargo. Roman leans against the desk, jaw tight, visibly sickened. The man who broke bread at his table had been poisoning the well for years. It is a bitter lesson. Those standing closest to you are in the best position to slide the knife in. Serafina watches, her tears turning to cold horror. My father saw this, she whispers. Julian gives a grim nod. Dominic clicks a grainy file. Gabriel's exhausted face fills the screen, his paranoid eyes darting as he searches for the ghosts already coming to end his life. Let us look closely at this, you and I. Seeing her father's face, Serafina gasps, the shock striking like a physical blow. This video is a transmission from the grave. Staring into the lens, Gabriel confesses. He uncovered the syndicate's secrets and tried to use them to buy his family's safety. He severely underestimated the monsters. It is a tragic lesson in bargaining with the devil. You never get to dictate the final price. Serafina breaks down. The lifelong lie of her father, abandoning her, washes away in an instant. Roman stands beside her, a statue carved from solid ice. Gabriel's final breath is a dire warning. He calls Luca a man with no soul, pointing to Roman as the only weapon sharp enough to cut away the rot before a rabid victor destroys everything. The screen dies into hissing static, throwing a cold strobe across their faces. There are no neat resolutions here, only the bleeding edge of truth. Serafina collapses into a chair as decades of repressed agony shatter her defenses. Let the camera linger on Roman. His dark eyes reflect the dancing static. He did not pull the trigger on Gabriel, but the crushing weight of his legacy buries him alive. He sees the total rot Luca pumped into his bloodline. He knew my name, Roman whispers. His voice is stripped of its iron armor. Dominic watches quietly, realizing Gabriel saw Roman as the only cure for this sickness. We can never outrun the sins of our fathers, but we can choose to face them. Roman pivots slowly, anchoring his absolute focus on the broken woman before him. Watch this fragile moment unfold. Roman closes the distance, wading through air thick with grief. He presses his hands over her trembling shoulders, forcing her to look up. The harsh lighting softens as he dismantles her despair with surgical precision. He delivers the brutal truth. Her father lied solely to build a fortress around her. It is a tragic irony that our deepest wounds often come from the very hands trying to keep us safe. When she asks why the betrayal still hurts, Roman offers a devastating reality. Love and absolute ruin are born from the exact same seed. Her final walls crumble into dust. She collapses against his chest, and he cages her in a fierce embrace. In this single heartbeat, the looming violence fades entirely, leaving only their shared tragedy in focus. The ambient noise drops away, leaving only the raw sound of her sobbing against his chest. Study the rigid line of Roman's jaw. Here is a killer raised in a frozen wasteland, suddenly burning alive with the warmth of empathy. The others silently melt into the shadows to respect this sacred grief. When she pulls away, her breathing ragged, Roman's hand rests firmly at the nape of her neck, anchoring her to the present. She looks up, searching the eyes of a supposed monster, but finds only her refuge. She asks what becomes of her once this nightmare concludes. Roman does not hesitate. "You stay with me." He vows the words, a heavy, gravelly promise. It reminds us that true sanctuary is never just coordinates on a map. It is simply a person willing to stand beside you in the absolute dark. The cinematic frame tightens, shutting out the ruined world. Roman's gaze is a dark, heavy ocean. He warns her not to ask, that if she is not prepared to be bound to his life forever. Despite the death waiting outside, her heart hammers against her ribs. Panic vanishes, replaced by a deep magnetic pull. He brings his thumb to her jawline, his touch gentle enough to let her escape. She does not flinch. When their lips meet, it is an absolute shattering surrender. In his arms, a woman who spent her existence as collateral damage finally recognizes her worth. The lesson is timeless. We only ever accept the love we believe we deserve. The quiet poetry of their breath is abruptly shattered by Dominic's harsh voice from the doorway, dragging the cruel reality back into the room. Watch the exact frame where the air in the room simply freezes. Dominic whispers the name of the riverfront facility, and the warmth drains from Roman's face. What replaces it is the hollow stare of a starving predator. He shuts off his heart, retreating into the cold sanctuary of violence. "Then we end it," he commands. When Serafina demands to walk into the inferno with him, Roman's instinct warps into suffocating control. He just wants to lock her away. Yet, look at the defiant fire burning in her eyes. She dissects Luca's twisted psychology, proving her presence on the board is the only move to force his hand. She steps back into the nightmare to rewrite their fate. In this life, true strength never comes from hiding from the dark. It comes from walking into the monster's cage on your own terms. Dominic gives a slow nod to her logic, earning a glare of absolute murder from Roman. Julian takes a firm step to her side, a choice that seals her tragic fate. The camera lingers on the deep agony, fracturing the cold marble of Roman's expression. His mind knows she is right, yet his soul screams against the unbearable risk. Serafina is no longer frightened prey. She is the fierce architect of her own survival now. The scene cuts to a rotting warehouse beside the ink-black river. Victor paces the cracked concrete like a rabid dog, his ego dripping with a pathetic thirst for blood. But Luca sits in absolute, terrifying stillness. He is the dark maestro of a tragedy he wrote himself, entirely empty of guilt. It reminds us that the most destructive forces are rarely the loud outbursts, but rather the quiet silences we fail to notice. As Roman's shadows encircle the rusted steel walls, the lens pushes in tight. Luca simply smiles. Let us look at this fatal miscalculation together. Through the sickly glow of flickering monitors, Victor and Luca watch the approach. They firmly believe that love has made Roman soft, convinced that human warmth ruins a killer's focus. They could not be more wrong. Roman has already accepted the destruction of his own soul just to ensure she keeps breathing. Arrogance always blinds cruel men to the terrifying power of someone who has nothing left to lose. Outside, the infiltration unfolds like a dark ballet. Streetlights die, cameras go blind, guards drop to the wet pavement without a sound. Before stepping into the slaughter, Roman locks Serafina inside the armored car. He leans down, pressing his forehead firmly against hers in the blue shadows. It is a wordless transfer of his fierce strength. True devotion always means giving away our own armor to protect the ones we cherish most. The heavy iron doors kick open, and absolute chaos swallows the frame. In under 60 seconds, the warehouse detonates into a suffocating labyrinth of gunfire and screaming steel. Watch Victor's men scatter, their bloated egos entirely useless against a phantom who paints the walls with pure violence. But the camera refuses to linger on the bloodshed. Instead, it pulls back slowly, gliding through the thick glass to find Serafina trapped in the armored darkness of the car. The muffled cracks of rifles echo like rolling thunder inside her skull, stretching every passing second into a lifetime of agony. She clutches a heavy handgun, her knuckles turning bone white. We often forget a very simple truth. The most terrifying battles we face are usually fought entirely alone, trapped within the quiet confines of our own minds. Suddenly, a blood-soaked hand slaps violently against her window as a dying enemy crawls toward the lock. Raw terror floods her veins, threatening to freeze her solid. Her muscles lock down tight. The heavy trauma of her past begs her to simply close her eyes and surrender. But a sudden memory cuts through the suffocating panic. She hears Roman's low, steady voice guiding her trembling hands. She absolutely refuses to be a helpless victim in her own story anymore. The gunshot shatters the window in a brilliant, deafening explosion of glass. The brutal kick of the weapon nearly snaps her delicate wrist, but the shadow outside crumples to the cold pavement. In this violent instant, she completely destroys her own learned helplessness. We learn here that true courage is never the absence of fear, but the agonizing choice to fight back despite it. She wipes away a single hot tear, hardening her soul. Meanwhile, the camera cuts inside to a tragic standoff. Victor cowers behind the frail body of her mother, shouting desperate threats into the cold air. Let us step into this suffocating room together, where the air hangs heavy with the copper scent of impending death. The camera pans to find Luca stepping into the harsh, flickering light. He moves with the sick theatricality of a man who has fallen in love with his own chains. For decades, he served an empire that ground his soul into dust, yet he still worships the ghost of his captivity. It is a harsh, unyielding lesson for all of us. When we stubbornly hold on to our bitter resentments, we become the wardens of our own prisons. Luca spits pure poison about Roman's father, openly confessing his dark betrayals. Through it all, Roman remains a statue of cold marble, his eye locked dead on the hostages. But then, the heavy iron door groans open. Serafina steps right into the center of the nightmare. Her arrival is a brilliant spark in a powder keg, shifting the entire weight of this tragedy in a breathless second. For the very first time, we witness a tiny, fractured crack in Roman's iron mask. A single muscle tenses in his jaw. The crushing weight of truly loving someone has finally breached his fortified defenses. Luca eagerly seizes on this rare vulnerability, his voice dripping with venom as he cruelly mocks her tragic bloodline. Beside him, Victor tightens his brutal grip on the terrified hostage. The camera pushes in deep on Serafina. Her hands shake violently, trembling like pale leaves caught in a bitter storm, yet her voice cuts cleanly through the darkness. It is steady and completely defiant. Love often demands we stand tall, even when our very bones are vibrating with fear. The silence stretches out, pulled taut until it violently snaps. Driven by the primal, desperate love of a mother, Luciana throws her frail body against her captor. A kinetic burst of violence follows. Roman's weapon flashes, dropping Victor to the floor. The room suddenly plunges into a disorienting darkness, pierced only by the jagged strobe of heavy gunfire. Twisted shadows dance on the concrete walls like hungry demons. Victor, bleeding out and consumed by the blind rage of a dying king, lunges toward Luciana for one final act of cruelty. Watch this exact frame closely. This is the precise moment the innocent girl dies and the fierce survivor is born. Serafina throws her own body right between the monster and her fragile mother. The camera lingers on her tear-streaked face. The girl who once froze in terror now raises a trembling barrel. She whispers that they severely underestimated her heart before she pulls the trigger. The gunshot echoes loudly, proving that our deepest wounds always forge our strongest weapons. Hearing the heavy groan of a falling man, Roman spins around, his dark eyes catching the wicked glint of Luca's hidden blade. You and I have seen this specific kind of blind hubris before. It is the fatal flaw etched into the bones of every great tragedy. The brutal physical exchange leaves Roman stumbling backward, a rare moment of sheer weakness that Luca greets with a twisted, triumphant smile. The old man mocks the very concept of human love, utterly blind to his own approaching doom. But the truly devastating blow does not come from the bleeding Mafia king. It comes from the darkest corner of the room. The camera shifts slowly to Luciana, her frail hands wrapped tightly around the cold steel of a discarded pistol. Decades of silent weeping, of bruised ribs and swallowed screams, suddenly forge into a piercing, deadly focus. She looks her lifelong abuser dead in the eyes, claiming back her stolen life in one breathless whisper, and fires. The beautiful irony is a lesson we cannot ignore. The women, these arrogant men treated like ordinary dirt, became the very earth that finally buried them. The suffocating dust finally settles, catching the moonlight in a cinematic silver haze. Victor drags his ruined frame against the splintered desk, clinging to a fragile throne of ash. Roman moves through the wreckage, his face carved into a mask of chilling emptiness. He kicks the bloodied weapon aside, leaving only the deafening silence of an open grave. Ignoring the crimson spreading across his ribs, Roman drops to his knees beside Serafina. She is the single flickering candle in his dark universe. Paralyzed by shock, her eyes trace the blood on his knuckles, and her terror quickly dissolves into a desperate fear for his fading life. True love, in its purest form, always demands that we momentarily ignore our own bleeding wounds to bandage the soul of another. Roman weakly brushes her trembling hands away. His gravelly whisper is meant only to anchor her spirit back to reality. He gently cups her tear-stained cheek, and the camera lingers on the staggering contrast of a man built for violence, displaying such quiet tenderness. Luciana watches from the floor. She stares at the blood soaking his collar, calling him the savior her late husband prayed for. The lens catches the agonizing tightening of Roman's dark eyes. A man who has lived believing he is a monster cannot fathom being viewed as a saint. It reminds us that our true worth is often visible to everyone but ourselves. Later, behind his high fortress walls, the bleeding finally stops, but the coming war breathes heavily down their necks. Here, hesitation is a death sentence. Come with me now, stepping away from the blood and into the cold mind of a king at war. We watch a brutally beautiful montage of systemic erasure. With the clinical detachment of a surgeon, Roman severs the vital arteries of his rival's empire. Dirty money burns. Arrogant men who thought they were gods are erased from the earth. He is violently cutting away the rotting flesh of his own toxic legacy. It teaches us that sometimes you must burn down your house to be free of its ghosts. But the emotional masterpiece here is his quiet return to her. As he pushes open the heavy oak door, the violence drains out of his rigid posture. Serafina stands by the towering window, bathed in the fragile light of a new dawn. The world outside is burning, yet in her silhouette, Roman finds his peace. The second the door clicks shut, her wide eyes dart to his bandaged ribs. The night's trauma hums beneath her pale skin like a live wire. She turns to him, her voice barely a ragged breath. She killed a man, and the guilt is crushing her. Roman steps into the soft light. His tone is steady, framing the act not as murder, but as the necessary price of breathing in this dark world. The tragedy deepens as tears catch in her lashes. She knows his world is poison. Yet she whispers that her shaking only stops when he is in the room. It is a devastating surrender. Often, the greatest peace we find is hidden inside the chaos we fear most. The camera pushes in on Roman's face. The untouchable predator, a man of iron and blood, is brought to his knees by the staggering weight of her honesty. Roman's jaw tightens into a hard line of guilt and fear. He tries to push Serafina away, desperate to spark some survival instinct in her. In a voice grinding like crushed stone, he warns her to run from the heavy shadow he drags behind him. But her fingers only curl tighter into his shirt. He knows he cannot erase the bruises of her past, just as he cannot offer the delusion of an ordinary life. Instead, he offers a blood-sworn vow. He will stand as a wall of fire between her and the wolves. No one will ever threaten her again. Look at the agonizing contradiction inside him. He whispers she is free to leave, yet his massive hands hold her desperately against his chest. It is a striking reminder that love is often a terrifying gamble, demanding we risk our own safety for someone else. Let's look at this moment together. This is where our Greek tragedy pivots toward hope. Roman frames his devotion as a brutal contract, offering to be the monster who keeps all other monsters away. Serafina stares into his eyes, haunted by a past where men used promises solely as heavy chains. A fragile smile touches her trembling lips as she whispers that she really ought to hate him. The suffocating tension breaks when Roman lets out a dry, self-deprecating sigh, muttering about his awful luck with romance. That brief flash of humor changes the gravity of the room. The terror visibly drains from her rigid shoulders. Her touch is no longer a desperate plea to survive, teaching us a profound truth. True personal agency only begins when our deepest fears finally end. His arms surround her with a fierce, possessive gravity. He holds her like a man guarding his only treasure, even as his mind plots the burial of his enemies. When Serafina playfully leans back, revoking her promise of forever, a rare warmth softens the cruel angles of Roman's face. For the first time, the exhausted, hunted animal inside her rests. The camera lingers on the pure relief glowing in her smile. Yet, the tragic irony remains thick. This gentle peace inside the room is bought by the blood spilling in the streets outside. The corrupt Mafia empire crumbles under the crushing weight of Roman's fury. We learn a heavy lesson here. True safety often demands a painfully steep price. The cowards who once hid behind Luca's throne are now fleeing into the dark. Stick with me here, because we are arriving at a quiet truth. True healing is never about hiding from the dark, but learning to see clearly within it. Roman spends every second trying to shield her, building an iron fortress to keep her pain away. But the fragile bird with broken wings is gone. Over the seasons, Serafina refuses the suffocating safety of a glass cage. Instead of shrinking away, she stands tall in his gloomy study, organizing the exact files and photographs that once brought her sheer terror. She dismantles her own nightmare, piece by piece, under the glow of a desk lamp. By stepping out of the shadow of victimhood, she teaches us that real strength is adapting your heart to thrive, even in a dangerous world. For the first time in his life, Roman's absolute control is fracturing. Serafina is no longer terrified of his presence, making her the most dangerous variable in his world. He tries to draw rigid lines, but she steps effortlessly over them, wearing his oversized shirts just to feel close to him. She remains the only force on Earth capable of overriding his cold logic. Months later, as his rival's empire burns to ash, we can close this bloody chapter together. The camera catches them in a quiet courtyard, watching the red sun bleed below the horizon. They are entirely bound to one another now. Their survival reveals a hard-earned lesson. True healing rarely means returning to a state of pure innocence. Instead, it is learning how to walk in the dark without flinching. The violent aftermath of this Mafia war ends without the grand theater usually seen in the underworld. Instead, the dust settles into a surprisingly quiet peace. Luciana finds her footing, breathing freely without looking over her shoulder. Roman transforms as well, choosing to rule his empire through disciplined order rather than chaotic terror. Serafina still carries the deep scars of her past, but she wears them as medals of resilience, not heavy chains. When Roman approaches her in the fading evening light, the usual dominance is completely gone from his posture. He offers her a simple, unpretentious ring. It is the breathtaking climax of their dark story. He has learned a profound lesson. A human heart only truly belongs to you when it is completely free to walk away. The air in the dim room fractured as Roman took a sharp, trembling breath. It was a raw sound defying every brutal tradition of his violent bloodline. The cold patriarchs before him would have seen this vulnerability as a fatal weakness. Yet, bathed in the soft shadows, Roman lets his heavy armor fall. He speaks of the poison surrounding them, his voice thick with devastating empathy. He confesses that the moment their eyes first met, his empire of cruelty began to crumble. We rarely get to witness such a profound surrender on screen. A man raised to rule through terror is dismantling his own throne, offering her a quiet, equal peace. Life teaches us that tearing down our walls is the bravest act of all. Serafina lets the agonizing silence linger, beautifully reclaiming her power. The suffocating tension in the room finally breaks when a weary, genuine smile touches Serafina's bruised lips. She accepts his exhausted surrender, but adds a soft warning laced with dark humor. She promises him that if his old, controlling shadows ever return, she will simply vanish into the night. For the first time in his violent life, pure warmth floods Roman's dark eyes, sealing their unspoken vow. In the tragic theater of their lives, this incredible woman has completely rewritten the script. Tossed into a ruthless Mafia underworld as a disposable pawn, she waded through deep trauma and walked out entirely unbroken. Roman finally realizes that the real danger was never a rival boss, but the terrifying prospect of living without her. This powerfully reminds us that our greatest resilience lies in finding hope. It takes true, undeniable bravery to trust a fragile love born directly from the ruins. As the camera pulls back slowly, leaving them in the quiet glow of the ruined room, we are left to reflect on their incredible story. I invite you to share this tragic romance with anyone who understands the fierce resilience of the human heart. You and I have walked through a twisted maze today, exploring the heavy toll of betrayal and the quiet miracle of our survival. The human soul truly is an endless, shadowed hallway. If this intense story moved you, stay close as we turn the pages of more dark narratives. Our next tale will pull us deeper into the fragile, terrifying depths of the mind. Just remember this simple, profound truth as we part ways today. We must never look away from the darkness, because it is only by facing our deepest, most terrifying shadows that we truly learn how to protect and nurture the light.